Hey everybody, welcome to Contra Talk. My name is Richard Henry, and this is the podcast where we talk about things that matter. As you can see, we're in a different location. At least I am at the moment. I will be in another location on site with a pastor friend who's a husband and a father. He's been pastor for 15 years at Christ the King Church in Cincinnati. Our conversation's about his experience at the SBC. It was his first time he'd been in several years. I've gone the last 3 years, so I kind of wanted to get his take since I didn't experience it. And the wins and the losses, the pros and the cons, and several other things that kind of are helpful, I think, that a lot of times we don't really consider as convictional evangelicals, something that we just kind of brush past, we just don't think about. So anyway, it's a great conversation with Michael Clary. Again, he's a pastor of Christ the King Church in Cincinnati. Hope you enjoy this conversation. All right, Pastor Michael Clary, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks,
How
man.
are you?
Good, I'm good.
Good.
Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for being here. Again, we're on site here at the church you pastor, Christ the King, not the Catholic Church.
No, not Catholic.
And that's in Cincinnati here too.
Oh, there's a Catholic Christ the King Church. There's a Lutheran, if I'm not mistaken, and we actually got a tithe check once to Christ the King Church. But it was like the parish of Christ, so we could tell it was Catholic.
Oh, funny.
So we had to like track down, It's like, hey, I don't think you meant that to go here.
You're like, we'd take it, but no, it's good. Well, no, we're here in Cincinnati. Thanks again for joining me. You've been on the show before. You went to the SBC for the first time. And tell us just kind of your initial thoughts. I know you've been a pastor here for 15, 16 years. You planted here, church is thriving. It's always been an SBC church, but you weren't super involved, I guess, probably the best way to put it. But you're seeing issues and you're wanting to get more involved. Tell us a little bit, kind of your first experiences, initial thoughts and all that with going to the meeting, what you thought was going to be and everything else.
Yeah. This was the second convention that I went to, but this is the first time I participated in the business meeting.
Okay.
So that's different. The first time I went, I was actually a NAM church planter, and they flew us to New Orleans. The last time, it was not the one last year, but the one before that.
Okay.
So it's been about 10 years ago. And they just said, like, hey, come down to New Orleans and you fly down here on our dime. Mm-hmm. And they filmed a few videos about church planting with us while we were there, but that was it. But this is the first time that I was like, okay, I have things that I care about that I see in the SBC. I've been around long enough to make some observations of my own, made some friends, and yeah, we share some similar concerns, and so we wanted to go there and try to, have a voice, make a difference. So this is the first time I participated in the business meetings, and it was one thing that's just. I expected it to be a big snooze fest. Yeah. And it was actually quite entertaining. Like there were lots of just laugh out loud moments. It was refreshingly simple. They didn't it wasn't like we take ourselves super seriously. Mm-hmm. And that was nice because it didn't feel like a typical, high strung business meeting. But there were some tense moments too when there were you could tell people were upset or were trying to deal with something they care about, weren't getting their way. So there were a few of those moments too. But all in all, I really enjoyed being a part of it. The best thing of all was just seeing other people that I, have gotten to know. That some people I didn't really know very well, but got a chance to work with them more closely in the past year. Some of them are people that I'd met just online and got to meet for the first time in person. And that was interesting because because of our interactions online, it was as though we had always been. It wasn't like, oh, I'm meeting you for the first time. It was just like, oh yeah, that's cool. So it was like there was quite a bit of rapport built up, but that was one of my favorite things, and I'm hooked. We want to be a part of it, and we'll continue to do so over in the coming years. Yeah, awesome.
What was so it's Tuesday, Wednesday, right? It's and Tuesday's really the main day. What were you expecting? I know you said instead of be a snooze fest. Beyond that, was there any sort of did you expect it to be more hostile, more comfortable, more egalitarian, more conservative, more, kind of the temperature in the room, and it was different, or kind of, putting your finger in the air, being on site? You only see so much with videos online and, videos like this. Being there, what was it like?
Yeah, it was about what I was expecting.
Okay.
So it wasn't there were obviously a few things that, it was like, oh, I didn't see that coming. But for the most part, it's about what I expected. There was I think there's everybody, so being conservative, there's value there. That there's currency with calling yourself conservative and calling yourself complementarian. So everybody is trying to play to that verbiage and to gather the credibility that comes from using it, while at the same time doing things that I think may or may not align with those words. But everybody there would call themselves conservative.
Yeah.
And everybody would say, maybe with a few exceptions, most everybody there would call themselves complementarian. One of the themes that emerged for me was just noticing how what really gets play in the room. Baptisms, that gets play. Mission, evangelism, those kind of things. Not nearly so much theology, doctrine. Those and the sense of unity, let's get along, that seemed to be really important. So anything that seemed like, oh, there's tension, there's some conflict, whatever, that was like, that was not. Let's move on past that pretty quickly. And so my takeaway is like, okay, people care about baptisms, they care about mission. This is not a place where people want to deal with doctrine. There's a place where this is there's really not a whole lot of room for open conflict. That makes the room pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so winning the room is more important than winning the argument about any particular issue. And so I think that's something, and guys that are in our camp, I don't think that's our strength. I think we're guys we're truth guys. We're guys that really care about let's have our doctrine right, and let's make sure we articulate a theological point. I think that will get you 30% of the way there. But really, in the room, in the moment, you have to win the room. And that's why the platform has a strategic advantage. It's because they can dictate terms, they can bring business up at certain times, they've got the microphone. And so the platform generally got its way at the convention.
Yeah, I've noticed that the last three, and going into Nashville in 21 was kind of like my first, this is what's happening. I think the things that admittedly, and you probably picked up far sooner, but I don't know, that's out of order, you can't do this right now, this other, all of the parliamentary, I get it, I'm happy, I'm very convictionally a congregationalist, etc. But sometimes I'm just like, what just happened?
Well, whoever knows Robert's rules wins.
Right. Well, yeah.
You have to know Robert's rules and know what's in order, what's out of order, because that is the system.
And I don't. Yeah. So there you go.
and neither do I. And I think most people don't really care to know those things.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other things that you might feel like is a better use of your time, but knowing the procedure is really critical.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, that's a good way to put it. Knowing Robert's rules of orders. So there were. So I thought the law amendment would pass. Did you think it would pass?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. And so, for people listening, it got 61%, but it needs 2/3, right? So it needs 66%. Last year it was 86%, which I was very happy about. We got rid of Rick Warren and a few other. I think there were more wins last year than this year. What was it? How did it feel? I guess, for lack of a better word, on Wednesday when it didn't pass? What was it? Were there cheers anywhere, or was there people kind of hanging their head, or were people? What happened?
Yeah. So before, I think coming into convention, the guys that were in support of the law amendment, we felt pretty optimistic.
Yeah.
There were some. We're sober-minded, but optimistic. We thought, we've really got a good shot here. And for me, that was the one item on my wish list that I wanted. That was at the top of my list, and getting Jared Moore elected, that was at the top of my list. Those are the top two items. We lost both. But I felt optimistic. But while I was there sitting in the room, And this is the first time I'm really kind of taking things in and seeing even how business items are scheduled and how votes are taken. Those things, they do matter because the room can be fickle. I would have thought that most of the messengers there would have came there having their mind made up. They already knew what they were going to do. Talking to some people afterwards, I'm more under the impression that a number of people didn't really know until it came time to raise your ballot or not. And so that tells me that the way you schedule business matters. So I believe it's First Baptist Alexandria was the church that was disfellowshipped.
Yeah.
So that was scheduled earlier in the day. And in so doing, the argument would be easily made that, see, our process works. We don't need a law amendment to disfellowship a church that's out of bounds. We had Saddleback last year in Fern Creek, I believe it was last year, of FBC Alexandria this year. Why do we need a law amendment when we have a system here that already works? And so that passed like 90%. And then it wasn't long after that we went to the vote on the law amendment. And the way that time is scheduled, and so there are 10 microphones, I believe 10, scattered around the room. And I don't know what rhyme or reason there is behind why or who the chair calls in what order. Because it could be like, all right, microphone number 3, you have the floor. Microphone number 7, you have the floor.
Right.
And let's say you've got, 10 minutes scheduled for debate. Every speaker gets 3 minutes. You can filibuster pretty easily. And there's really no opportunity to hear both sides or to hear really a fully fleshed out argument. Coming into the convention, guys that were pro-law amendment, I think we had won the argument. There really wasn't any substantive opposition from an argumentation standpoint because all the objections had been answered and answered very thoroughly, and the anti-law amendment arguments did not really hold water. But that didn't really matter because in the room, there was a sense of, I could just kind of feel the tide turning. After the FBC Alexandria, I was like, wait a minute, this could go either way. Because if everybody in the room sees like, oh, our system works, then they'll be easily convinced that we don't need the law amendment. And whenever it came time to vote for the law amendment, this was brilliant on the part of Bart Barber. And I'm not going to, well, I don't know the man's motives, but I could tell you if he was motivated the way I think he was, because he was not in favor of the law amendment, this was a brilliant move, which was to do a secret ballot. It has the appearance of we're going to make sure every single vote is going to be counted accurately, because there were a couple of votes prior to that when it was just kind of raise your hand, and he just said, okay, the nays have it or the ayes have it.
Right.
And I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
I'm looking
there was
around
a few
the
times I've seen that too. You're like,
Yeah, and I'm like-
hold on.
Yeah, and so somebody would have to run to a mic and hit the urgent button,
Right.
and then call the whatever you have to say. Whatever you have to say to be like, wait a minute.
911. Yeah. Sure.
To say like we need to have a recalculation of this. So everybody was like, wait a minute, those didn't, like what you said didn't seem to match the room. And then he said, okay, for the law amendment, we're going to do paper ballot, which at the moment seemed like, okay, now every vote's going to be counted and we're not going to have any shenanigans. But what that did was that gave cover to anybody who would not want to be seen by the other messengers with them voting in favor of or against. So if you're in favor of the law amendment, but you have people with you that aren't, then you raise your hand in favor of the law amendment, then people are looking at you like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Or vice versa. And so it gave everybody cover of anonymity that I think people might have made statements one way for political reasons, but the secret ballot enabled them to just kind of vote the way they wanted. And so it's like nobody really had the social accountability in the room at the moment of being seen for what they voted for. And I think that probably played against the law amendment rather than in favor of it.
Yeah, I don't remember how we voted. Somebody can put in the comments, or I'll find out later. But I don't remember how we voted last year, whether it was
I believe it was
writing.
I believe it was just like put the ballot up in the air or whatever.
It might have been. I honestly don't
I say that based on what I've heard other people say.
Hey, it's me from the thing you're currently watching. If you are enjoying this content, please like, thumbs up, and also subscribe if you want more content like this. Easy way to do that and help out the channel is subscribe. Drop a comment too if you think something needs to be said, or just say hi, because that also helps the algorithm. Anyway, back to the show. So how do you, though, answer someone who says, but Pastor Michael, like, this worked. I mean, we've got rid of these churches. There's others we'll get rid of. The BFM 2000 says, Pastor, why do we need the law amendment? I know it's a moot point at this point, but how did you answer people online, or maybe here at Christ the King, or wherever?
Well, we needed clarity. So the Credentials Committee, now we don't have the clarity that they were seeking on what is a pastor or who is qualified to be a pastor. So whether or not somebody could be a children's pastor or a women's discipleship pastor, that question is still an open question because the law amendment did not settle it. So now it's up to the Credentials Committee to decide on a case-by-case basis whether or not this individual church is in friendly cooperation. So basically, what it does is it gives a longer leash to churches that have these kind of what some might consider gray area women pastors, to say, like, well, we're in friendly cooperation because she doesn't function in the office of elder. She's a woman's pastor or a children's pastor, and so it enables them to continue using the title, continue for that ambiguity to perpetuate for another at least 2 years. And so we haven't really solved the question that needed to be answered, which is, can these various types of pastoral roles still be considered in friendly cooperation, which the law amendment was targeted directly at that. Cannot be only biblically qualified men can be a pastor of any kind.
That's right.
Rough
That's
paraphrase.
Yeah.
And so what's going to happen now is, like, the Credentials Committee is going to conceivably, I mean, if some reports are like there's in the neighborhood of 2,000 churches in the SBC that have women pastors.
Wow. So, I've heard 1,200, 12,000, 2,000, wow.
Well, there's a guy who wrote an article on American Reformer that he said there were a couple of different calculations, but up close to like 1,900 was the high estimate.
Yeah,
1,200 was the low estimate. Rick Warren himself said that there was like 2,000. So it enables the ambiguity to continue. In so doing, the egalitarian flavor that would happen in any of those churches, I think that will continue to grow because the issue is not settled.
Yeah.
The New York Times and the Washington Post, they got the headlines they were looking for, which is something that sounded like the SBC is now pro-women pastors, and the fundamentalist crazy guys, they lost. Yeah. Which now will attract a certain element potentially to Southern Baptist churches. It gives them the victory lap they were hoping for. But at the end of the day, we still have this open question, and the Credentials Committee could be potentially flooded with hundreds of churches that are in violation that someone might report to them. So they could either say, this is more than we can handle, so we'll only handle 1 or 2 or however many, because there's a big, long process. And if that's the case, then this problem will only continue because you can only handle so many at a time. And that to me seems like that's one avenue. Or the Credentials Committee could just buckle under the weight of it all. And I don't know what they would do, but if they were swamped just with the few that they've had to deal with so far, then if you can imagine if there's hundreds of them, then that would make the problem. You just have this big backlog. So the problem is not going anywhere because we didn't provide the clarity that was needed. And maybe that's what's needed for messengers to see, well, we actually do need to address this. But it's not easy to explain for a lot of people how the machinery works. And because of that, in the moment, somebody could just demagogue the argument, saying like, these mean fundamentalists want women to just never be able to do any kind of ministry at all. And
that was the point, though, I thought, right?
Yeah, that's what we're after. We're just hateful guys who want to
corner, stare at the walls, ladies. Sorry.
But yeah, that's I'm talking too much.
No. Well, it's an interview of you, so yeah. Again, I was surprised, and I think a lot of people. It was probably because a lot of people weren't really convinced. I mean, I talked to a few people. I did some like man on the street interviews last year at New Orleans, and several people, Lord love them, but older folks we just love the basically we just love the platform and believe everything they say is effectively what they told me, but there were younger guys. I met a couple of church planners. One was in Colorado, I think Colorado Springs. Anyway, they see the stuff, they see the issues. So, I don't know if that's generational. I know a lot of people believe, we're all conservatives. We're all conservatives. We all with the most conservative. And it's like, yeah, we are the most conservative. That's probably true, at least in the huge numbers category. But it's still, with the ERLC alone, which I want to talk about, just killing, pun intended, abortion bills that are just like, well, that's too much. We can't penalize women. And just these things, it's just like, are you a Christian? It's just, Brent Leatherwood, he's something else. But tell us about that. I want to move on from the law amendment then. I guess probably a whole show on it, honestly. But I know I've seen at least one or two times a push to disband, defund ERLC. At other meetings, that happened again at this meeting. I know Tom Askell, great pastor down in Florida, brought it up. It didn't pass, right? But tell people why, or kind of what was the similar temperature, and again, why would somebody or why should we want to defund the ERLC?
Why it didn't pass, I can't say. I can tell you what Tom Askell said, which I thought was very mature and statesmanly. So he made a motion to abolish the ERLC, and whenever he was given a chance to voice the rationale for that amendment or that motion, he said you would need to have consecutive votes on this, just like the law amendment, for this to pass. And he said, now if we pass it now, that's not we could not today vote to abolish the ERLC. What we could do is send a message that the ERLC is not acting in accordance with the desire and the theology and the ethical commitments of the Southern Baptist Convention. So this sends a very clear message that is a form of accountability to the leadership and the staff of the ERLC, and then gives them the opportunity to course correct, which then, whenever it comes up for a second vote next year, then we could not vote for it again.
Sure.
But this is a way to send a message. And the first time, I believe the ERLC was mentioned on a few different occasions where people had the opportunity to speak. The first time it was mentioned, it was like people were out for blood. People the room was very much just like enthusiastic, and I was like, okay, man, the ERLC.
Against the ERLC.
Against the ERLC.
Okay.
People in this room are not a fan of the ERLC, and that was very clear by just the reaction of the room.
Okay.
But something between the first day and then the second day, whenever Tom Askell made his motion, something had changed, and I don't know what that was, because it wasn't like it was even, 51-49. I mean, it seemed like a significant majority of the people were not in favor of this. And I think if I were to speculate, it could be some misguided sense of, well, we want to be gracious to people, we want to give them a chance, he's doing the best he can, and they don't really see, because Christians, conservative Christians especially, we don't want to impugn motives. We're really careful about doing that. So we don't want to say this man is a bad actor. This man is a snake who is harming people, and he is acting maliciously and deceitfully. Nobody wants to believe that about someone.
Right.
And since you don't want to believe that, then you got to believe, alternatively, that, well,
he's just really incompetent.
Yeah, either he's incompetent or there must be some things that are more complicated that we don't really understand. And that's probably the issue.
Yeah, you don't want to impugn motives. I get it. But at the same time, and that's the hard thing, I think a lot of people, there's a naive nature at the same time. There's the balance of like, well, I don't want to accuse people, but it's like, well, how far do you take that? Just all the way to the bank? Just 100%? You're never, and then in doing that, it's like finding someone with a dead body and the knife in their hand. It's like, well, I don't know. I might have misunderstood. Like, no, the guy killed the guy. Like, let's not be idiots. Yeah.
Conservatives are naive.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah,
just,
we are.
that's, I think that's just part of our Constitution.
Yeah.
And progressives, they're not. I mean, they can be ruthless. They're political, and they know how to play dirty, and they know how to play to win. Whereas conservatives, we're like, we want to, fair play. We want to play by the rules. We don't want to impugn anybody's motives. And so we're much better at being innocent as doves than we are at being shrewd as serpents. And I think progressives, they're very shrewd. They're not very innocent at all.
No.
And so there are people within the system, within the SBC, that you get them in the right position, and they're surrounded by naive conservatives, and they can manipulate the system. They can manipulate the people around them.
I think that's happened a lot in the last few years.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And they may not, it's not like they are self-consciously wolvish.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think, I think there are some people that are like that. They're bad actors and they're out to destroy, but I think a lot of wolves don't even know that they're wolves. They don't know that they're acting wolfishly. They don't get it. They don't know what time it is, or they're not all that godly in their priorities, or they're driven by just like, we want to get more baptisms. That was something I heard so many times. It's just like how many baptisms and how much you gave the cooperative program. Those two talking points that superseded everything else, because the SBC is pragmatic. Ultimately, we're driven by numbers, and if you can produce results, then if you can manage the system, then that's going to sway a lot of people. Whereas guys like us, we're more convictional, and it's like, for me, I can stand to not get all the numbers that I would like to see if the numbers that we do have, we know are being faithful. These things were accomplished being faithful to God and His Word.
Yeah.
I think other people are just like, why are you worried about theology? Why are you worried about women pastors? There's souls to be saved out there.
Yeah.
Kind of heard that rhetoric a lot.
Well, and that's what I want to. So I want to touch on Clint Presley's president, which I was able to talk to him, Jared Moore, and David Allen for the show here. Those interviews have already come out, and they were all very good interviews. I asked them all the same questions, and they were all in for the law amendment. So that was an encouragement, among other things. So I mean, I would have rather had Moore or Allen, honestly, but I'm happy Clint Presley got in versus the other three guys.
Yeah.
Personally, I think the other guys would not be good at all. Especially two of them. Anyway, Dr. Jorg, however you say
I
it.
heard people say Jorge.
Jorg,
like a
Orge.
soft G.
I've heard Iorg. That's, yeah. The guy who used to be the president, he was Al Mohler, but in California at Gateway Seminary. Now he's the president of the EC, the executive committee, right? And he gave one of those kind of browbeating sermons.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's expected the last few years.
Yeah.
Tell us, were you there for the whole thing, or
I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was it like? We were there again. The tension with their heart beating. I mean, you can only know your heart, but what was it like? What was going on?
It was weird.
Yeah.
It was weird to be browbeaten by somebody who's in a leadership position, and to be so mischaracterized. As it's like, just like I said a moment ago, it's like conservatives, we don't want to question each other's motives. And it's like even it's like, I struggle with that. I struggle in the sense that I don't want to question somebody's motives. I don't know President George's, I don't know his motives.
Yeah.
But that said, he was certainly not hesitant to impugn the motives of people that he didn't agree with. And it was just like, you want to be nasty, mean-hearted. It was kind of the way he spoke. And the thing is, like, I know the men that he's talking about, or the kind of man that he's talking about, and probably I'm one of them. And if that's the case, and I'm like, do you know us? Do you know what we care about? Do you know? It's like, can you just kind of mischaracterize all of us and brush us to the side as though we are just these mean, nasty guys that are just fundamentalists that don't really care about people and don't care about winning the lost. We just want to win or just tear people down, politics of destruction, that sort of thing. And I'm like, okay, this man either doesn't know who these guys are and that he doesn't understand them and he just sees them as a threat, or he knows them and he knows that they are a genuine threat and he's going to deal with them by attacking them personally. in front of the biggest bully pulpit any of us have ever seen. 10,000 people gathered in a room and, calling out guys as though, I don't know if it was George or some other guy, but one of the guys made a comment about, guys that are active on social media. And the thing is, like, a lot of these guys on all over the spectrum are active on social media, but it's only the conservative guys that are really branded as the nasty ones. But he's made some comment. It's like, these immature seminary students at a coffee shop tweeting at some entity head, and I'm like, okay, I know these guys. These are very, very intelligent, educated men that are full of conviction, love for the Lord, humility, and it is their humility that drives them to speak the way they do. It is their love and their zeal for the Lord that would prompt them to speak with such passion because they're zealous for the name of God. That just told me, like, this guy doesn't know him.
Yeah.
And so it kind of reminiscent of Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables kind of comments. You could tell there's this scoffing, dismissal of conservatives, and it was just gross.
Every meeting I've been to, and this is obviously I wasn't there, but the liberals, for lack of a better word, are using leftist tactics, 100%, 100%. And it's just like, okay, again, like you said, we don't want to impugn motives, but you bear fruit in keeping with repentance. You see this, be a fruit inspector. We hear that with evangelism and Christian life and things like that. And it's like, oh, I'm a Christian, I love Jesus, but you don't act like a Christian in any capacity. Like, do you really love Jesus, right? And so similarly, when people act like that, and I did watch some clips, and he did mention, he brought up CRT and things like that, which of course is, gone. Sex Abuse Task Force, which I don't think we'll really get into, but unless you have any comments on it. But there's just, it's 2019, CRT, Resolution 9. And then going into 2021, because there wasn't a meeting in 2020, rescind Resolution 9, people wearing buttons and things like that. And then it's gone. Nobody knows. Everybody now knows that it's really horrible and toxic and terrible. And nobody apologized about it. Nobody said, oh yeah, this guy and that guy and this committee and Curtis Woods and other guys like that. Crickets. And then it's now the Sex Abuse Task Force. And even last year, almost nothing about the Sex Abuse Task Force. Yeah, they want more money, and they've invented several other task forces, but now it's women pastors. It's just like, it's like we're toddlers that are just like, oh, cool, candy. Oh, there's a squirrel. Can I watch a show? And it's just like, you hold on. Anyway, so the speech wasn't a sermon at all. Was not. I could tell he was trying to go at both sides, the left and the right side, but people who are paying attention, most of it was at guys who are active on social media. Yeah, for sure. Or just really pushing against going. You can watch a lot of the tapes, files, videos on YouTube of the last 10 years, and there's a lot of the same faces. Jeff Wright, who's a friend, both of us, pastor in Tennessee, he goes a lot. He talks a lot. Jared Moore, another one. Tom Askell, another one. And it's interesting. I'd be curious what the percentage of like people that go to the mic versus everybody else. It's not very high. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I don't know my point other than it was a very disgusting speech. Mm-hmm. It really was. It was not. And I was very, I didn't know anything about him. I assumed he was a nice guy. I know, you can't be a crazy liberal to be a president of SBC seminary. Southeastern. But I just watched it. I think it was John Harris. He was reviewing it last week. And I just thought, what? What are you talking about? You sound like a Democrat in 2016, like you said, Hillary Clinton and things. And just the insults, it just doesn't work at all. Anyway.
But they're given some there's some presumption of credibility on their part, I think, amongst the rank and file. Mm-hmm. And I think that they have, I think some guys, they really know how to play the room. They know how to work the room. They do have a certain personality that helps to just win people over, and you want to root for them. Bart Barber, I thought was brilliant. I really thought he did a fantastic job, insofar as what he wanted to accomplish. I think he did it pitch perfect because everybody liked him. even if you disagreed with him, he was a likable guy. There was a likable presence about him.
Bart is a very likable guy. He really is. Yeah.
He's a likable guy. Now,
Ed Litton was too, but anyway, 2 years ago.
Yeah, but I had gotten more familiar with him watching, kind of Twitter interactions over the past year. But in the room, it's like, I think he cracked a lot of jokes. It was funny. You make people laugh, you got them in the palm of your hand. And I think that's the way that just the constitution of the Southern Baptist Convention lends itself to that kind of dynamic, where personality, emotional sort of appeals, that's going to win the room over. I don't have an answer for that, because a lot of the things that we care about and need to be dealt with are things that need some theological rigor to them, and need some careful, critical thinking that isn't so emotionally manipulatable.
Manipulable. That was
manipulatable.
That was a bush.
All right, write that down. You heard it here first.
That was good.
Strategery. But still, it's like that's what works.
Yeah.
And so I think like there was a guy that I spoke to that wasn't one of the platform guys. I talked to him after it was all over, but I recognized him. It was just this chance conversation, and I actually did a tweet about it. This guy, it's like on the platform, he was just this friendly guy, He was a church planter, so he kind of had a church planter vibe, cool guy vibe. You could tell, like, oh yeah, people like this guy. But he told me it was more of just the one-on-one conversation. He's like, yeah, man, like, what'd you think of the law amendment? And I told him my thoughts. He goes, yeah, man, I just don't get that. I was like, we're not going liberal. I don't know what's going on, bro. If we're not going liberal, it's like, if anything, we're getting fundamentalist. And the way he said it, I was just like, people would believe him. Like, if he tells that story, people are going to believe him, that the big bad boogeyman of the Southern Baptist Convention are these nasty fundamentalists. And you don't have to argue for it. You don't have to make a case. You don't even have to define what fundamentalist is.
All right.
You just have to be a
Christian nationalist. Something.
You just have to be a likable guy that throws out a word that, well, this gets some negative baggage, and you say it in a way with a little kind of a look of concern on your face, and people will be eating out of the palm of your hand. And that's what this guy did, and I think that's their advantage.
Yeah, yeah. What other things stuck out to you? What other things you thought were maybe a win or close to a win? Or, I mean, I know we obviously lost the NAM thing, and of course the presidency, law amendment. Were there any wins? I guess maybe it's the best question that you saw.
There was the resolutions, which don't really matter.
Go.
Nothing changes.
They're not binding. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you have the resolution about IVF that was passed along with the resolution to thank Indianapolis for their hospitality. So it's like, it's not like these resolutions really change anything.
Jenny always is like, what is this? Why are we doing this?
But it's a way of kind of being able to claim.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to talk to somebody about what Southern Baptists believe, you can point to a resolution and claim, like, listen, like, Southern Baptist, we passed this resolution. This is what we believe about this thing.
Yeah.
That was a silver lining. I thought the IVF, that resolution was an encouraging sign.
Yeah.
But coming away, there wasn't a whole lot of victory that I could say that we can hang our hat on. It was telling. I think there are a lot of people that are seeing things the way guys like you and I would, and those numbers are increasing. But I would hope that more and more of them kind of are persuaded of our perspective. They need to get there quickly.
Yeah.
Because time is commitment, and the longer we go on the current trajectory without changing course, the more messengers that agree with the current course, they'll be recruited into the ranks, and it'll continue to kind of reinforce that same direction. NAM, I think, has a lot of power in the SBC, because they can pay for church planters to show up, and they can just fund their way to the convention as a perk of being a NAM church planter. And then you're going to be beholden to the entity that is footing the bill, because you're going to have a lot of gratitude for the free trip they just gave you. And of course, you're going to be like, yeah, I was told at this training that this is the way I need to vote on this or that issue, and you're going to go along with it. So, I mean, NAM has a lot of power for a lot of people in that room. And I don't have an answer for that. I don't know if anybody really has an answer for that, but it's a reality we have to contend with.
I know there was financial transparency in the 990s. That didn't even come up, right? Because wasn't there a resolution?
There's a resolution, went to the executive committee.
Yeah.
And the executive committee declined to bring it to a floor vote. So then there was a degree of kind of working the procedure from the floor to force the platform to go on the will of the messengers. So there was a guy that made I think Rhett Burns was the guy that actually was at the microphone doing this. He was the guy that submitted it to the executive committee.
That's right.
They said no. So from the floor, he made a motion, and I couldn't be able to recreate it here on the spot, but the effect of what his motion from the floor was to bring it to the messengers to vote on whether or not to vote on the resolution.
Right.
And that failed.
Funny. Really? Wow.
Yeah. And so, but the thing is, like, who understands that?
Yeah.
Now, if somebody just puts it on the screen, okay, we're voting on whether or not entities should be transparent. All in favor, raise your ballot. Everybody would vote for it.
Right.
But if the executive committee has the power to just not even bring it to the floor, and then you're voting on whether or not you'll have the opportunity to vote on this thing that is maybe even a little bit murky at that point, people are like, I don't know, man. It's like, it's 11:30.
Lunchtime.
It's 11:30. I'm getting kind of hungry.
Yeah.
I want to say no to that. And then we go another year without the financial transparency that we should have.
Yeah.
But that's how if you know how to manipulate Robert's rules and you know how to set an agenda, you know what times people are going to be hungry. You know how to. It is a massive enterprise of. Cynically, you could say socially manipulating a group of people to maximize the effect that you want. That's one way to put it. Or just managing your time. Either way, It's something that the platform controls, and they control it to great effect because they got pretty much everything they wanted.
Yeah. Man, well, does this keep you guys, this church, still in the SBC, still even more hungry and ready to fight?
No, we're out. We're burning to the ground. We went out.
I mean, I know we have friends and colleagues that they've left or they hate the SBC.
Yeah, there were some people that responded that way. We huddled after the law amendment failed, and we're like, okay, we know this is a big deal. And after that, we're like, okay, and it was like in that room. I looked around the room and I was thinking, man, this feels like a funeral because people definitely. My daughter keeps calling me. We're like, okay, this feels like a funeral. And we're like, okay, there's going to be some people that are going to be like, get out of there, run for your lives. The place is on fire. And we're like, okay, that's not how you win a significant battle. You win a significant battle by being sober-minded and, keep pushing for what you believe in. And you find a path to victory, and you stay after it. William Wilberforce didn't give up, and I wouldn't argue that the SBC is like equivalent to slavery, but there is an equivalent in the sense that it is a massive undertaking that is that a minority position from within is trying to work for reform, and it does seem achievable because I bet if you went messenger one at a time and interviewed every messenger that was there and you just talked them through every issue and you presented it just plainly and straightforwardly, I think most of them would see things the way we do. But the way that we see things is not advantageous to the platform in many cases. And so like financial transparency, for example, you could see there's an incentive to keep those things obscured if you've got sweetheart deals with speaker fees between different entity heads and different people. It's like, all right, you're a trustee at this entity, you're a trustee at my entity, but I know a guy that can get you a speaking gig at this other seminary, and you'll get paid. It's like people do this, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything, and I don't have a particular anecdote to share, but I do know in general these things do happen. And we're sinful, we're human. And that's why transparency is good for just general accountability. And that's why those in charge would not want those things to be in place.
Well, there's always next year. It's good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I plan on being there.
Yeah.
Dallas.
Well, hopefully I'll be there. Yeah, it is in Dallas. All right. Well, where can people find you? What's the church, Twitter, all that?
The church is here.
Yeah. Just come
So
by.
if you wanna know about my church, just come here. No, I'm kidding. We're Christ the King Church. We're here in Cincinnati, Ohio. ctkcincy.com is our church website. I'm most active on Twitter or X.
X. Yeah, right.
I refuse to call it X. It's wrong. D Michael Clary is my Twitter handle, and also have a Substack, dmichaelclary.substack.com, and I write stuff there. And I've got a podcast, Plain Speech Podcast. I have various things that I do in other places, but whenever I do other things, I normally, plug it on Twitter, and so people can find out there. So those are the main places to find me.
Yeah. Sounds good, brother. I appreciate the time. All right, everybody. Take care. It's good.